Adonai madam v'tedaehu ben enosh v'techashevehu Adam lahavel dama Yom Hov Ketzel Over Baboker Yatzitz V'chalav La'erev Yemolel Yavesh Tashev Enosh Adaka Vatomer shuvu v'nei adam luchachmu yaskilu zot yavinu le'acharitam ki lo v'moto yikach hakol lo yered acharav kevodo Podeh Adonai nefesh avadav v'lo yeshmu kol achosim bo. From Psalm 144, Adonai, what are we that you have regard for us? What are we that you are mindful of us? We are like a breath. Our days are like a passing shadow. We come and go like grass, which in the morning shoots up renewed and in the evening fades and withers. You cause us to turn to dust, saying, return to where you came from. Would that we were wise and that we understood where we are going. For when we die, we carry nothing away. Our glory does not accompany us. Mark the wholehearted and behold the upright, for we hope they have peace. Adonai, you redeem the souls of those who do your holy work, and none who trust in you shall be abandoned. Good morning. My name is Cantor Elizabeth Sachs. I'm senior clergy here at Temple Emmanuel, and it is my honor and privilege to be officiating at this service for Joni Litvak. Psalm 144, with which we just began our service, is a psalm that we use when we lose someone who saw life for what it was, who understood what our purpose and our point is here. And we recognize and we lift that Joni lived her life in exactly that way. So we are here today to mourn a remarkable woman. We're here today to mourn, let me just make sure that my cell phone is off. There we go. We are here today to mourn a woman who is remembered as being extraordinarily smart, extraordinarily thoughtful, extraordinarily tough and witty and determined and uncompromising and extraordinarily dedicated to her family, who sits right here. And so we will have the pleasure of hearing so many memories and versions of who she was as she lived her extraordinarily long life. We use our prayers in our tradition to help lift the soul of the person that we feel that we have lost, to help connect them to years and years of eternal prayers, as if to say that at this moment, their soul too deserves that eternity, and that we are going to remember them and treasure them in the way that we have treasured these words for so many years. And perhaps no other psalm has been lifted and used in such a way as Psalm 23. And in this psalm, we not only understand that there is a moment in time where we have to walk through a valley of death, that each of us will come in contact with that at some moment in our lives, but the entirety of the psalm creates this idea of pastoral rest. And we know that these last few months were not extraordinarily easy. And we hope and we pray that her soul is at peace, like her body is at peace, even as we know that she lived and loved every last moment to the very end. So we're going to chant Psalm 23, and then we are going to read it together, which is on the attachment that you have, the paper that you have in your front row. Adonai roi lo echsar bin hodeshe yarbitzeini al mei menuchot al mei menuchot yanaleni nafshi yeshoveh yeshoveh yancheni v'maglei tzedek yancheni v'maglei tzedek lemon shemo gam ki elech begit salmaven lo irara ki ata imadi shivtecha umishantecha hema Yenachamuni Taroch lefanai Shulchan neged tzorai Dishanta v'shemen roshi kosi revaya ach tov v'chesed yudefuni kol yemei chayai kol yemei chayai v'shavti bevei Adonai leorech yamim Adonai roi lo echsar Adonai roi lo echsar. We read together in the English of Psalm 23. Adonai is my shepherd, I shall not want. God makes me lie down in green pastures. leads me beside still waters, and restores my soul. You lead me in right paths for the sake of your name. Even when I walk in the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You have set a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You have anointed my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of God forever. One of the central commandments that we have in the Jewish tradition is that when those we love pass away, we are commanded to eulogize them. We are commanded to bring memories of their life, not just how we imagine the best parts, but how they actually lived. It is our job to remember the fullness of who they are. And in that way, to hope that by continuing to talk about them in their fullness, that their legacy lives on inside us, inside the next generation, and throughout the community of which they were such a strong member. And so at this time, we are going to invite members of the family to come and tell us about how Joni lived. And we are going to hear from Mimi, and we are going to hear from Joe, and we are going to hear from Ron as we think about the entirety of the spectrum of her life. Mimi? There you are. Okay.
I'm Mimi Karsh, Joni's sister. I've given the pleasure and honor of discussing Joni in her early years because I'm the only one here old enough to remember those early years. Joni was born in 1932, a beautiful cherubic child with blonde curls. We were told our mother carefully styled her curls in the fashion of Shirley Temple, the cute little movie star of the day. It wasn't long before Joni hated the daily curl session, and the battle was on. The strong personalities of the women of the family who preceded her was being carried forward. I came along nearly 6 years later. The time span between us did not allow for much sibling play and interaction. When I reached 6 or 7, I began to be aware of how our family interacted with Joni and talked proudly of her academic accomplishments and personal charms and skills. We were a 3-generation household, and our mother, grandparents' obvious pride made me aware of the footprints I was expected to follow. By the time Joni was about 15 and I 9, to her horror, I literally followed in her steps constantly, right on her heels. I was trying to be so hard to be part of the group. She had changed from a chubby Shirley Temple lookalike to a beautiful girl. What follows beautiful girls? Lots of boys. As I tried to hang around constantly, she did everything possible to lose me. It took horseback riding lessons and the faint promise from our mother of my own horse to keep me away and occupied. Some years later, and after 2 years of college in Columbia, Missouri, for Joni, one of those early young men, now a new attorney, showed up again, this time with his beautiful Labrador retriever. Anything with 4 legs in the animal kingdom could keep me busy and away from trying to learn his true intentions. To my surprise and the surprise of the whole family, he came with ideas of fixing her up. Fixing Joni up with his lifelong friend, another new law school graduate, Larry Litvak. It was love at first sight. 2 generations of our family were in shock. A West Sider, nearly an intermarriage. The in-love, strong-willed 20-year-old had had her own way again. They were engaged and married within 6 months or so, and off to Larry's basic training in Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. It was the Korean War draft time. A while later, back in Denver, the baby boom began. Joe in 1954, Dan in 56, Ron in 58. Joni became an extraordinary mother, first of one, then two, and then three boys in an amazingly short period of time. If you think I've forgotten something, you're wrong. Baby Ed arrived in 66, pardon me, 66. It was hectic, but she was a marvel, and to me, a role model in so many ways to the end. Larry was the brother I never had, and sometimes the father figure that I lost at an early age. Joni, along with Larry, continued to be my support, my comfort, my cheering squad, and for the rest of her life as well, my children's favorite aunt.
Aunt Mimi, Mom was a tough act to follow, but you did a wonderful job just now. I hope I can follow you. This setting is all too familiar. We were all just here less than 2 months ago for my dad, and I was standing here talking about how Dad was such a star. When he was in his 30s, when he was in his 40s, well, he was always a star, but he was really a glamorous, charismatic, handsome figure, and I was in awe of him. I talked about, in the eulogy that I gave for Dad, I talked about how I would go to the city and county building when he was trying a case and watch him, and it was like watching Paul Newman. He was so glamorous. It was like watching a television show, and it was kind of, it was a little bit intimidating to have such glamorous parents. And my mom was every bit the star that my dad was. I mean, we were looking through old photos the other day, and it was kind of breathtaking how beautiful they both were. Mom, as Aunt Mimi said, was a cute little Shirley Temple, a little bit against her will. She hated the girls, but a cute little Shirley Temple child as she became a beautiful girl and then a beautiful woman. There's a picture of her from, it would have been 1959 at the Town Club, the Jewish country club, except it was in the city, near downtown, near the Capitol. There was a swimming pool there, and we would go with Nana, Mom's and Aunt Mimi's mother, every day in the summer to swim and eat lots of hot dogs and hamburgers from the snack bar at the Town Club. There's a picture of Mom with little Ron, baby Ron at the age of 1. He's sort of on her back, only literally, not figuratively. Little Ron is on her back, and she is absolutely gorgeous. She looks like, I mean, she's better looking than the Hollywood stars of the period. Imagine Kim Novak, in 1958 or 59. Kim Novak through an Ashkenazic filter. And I always thought of Donna, Mom, as this is going to be a reference for only those above, say, 60 or 70 in the audience, but I always thought of Mom as Donna Reed, a movie star, television star, of the period, except, Donna Reed through an Ashkenazic filter. She was gorgeous, and every bit as charismatic as Dad, and absolutely brilliant. Her intelligence was formidable and also a little bit scary, as we've discussed these last few days. The difference between there were lots of differences between Mom and Dad. They were both stars, but I mean, and I think in the spirit of the sort of full picture that Cantor Sachs suggested, we should acknowledge that Mom was Mom was an amazing mother and a wonderful homemaker. She was frustrated in that role. It was the 1950s, after all. She got married in 1952, and as Mimi said, she proceeded to have 3 little rambunctious boys in quick succession, and then a 4th in 1966. And while she was, as I said, an incredible mother, and later, as Ron will talk about, an incredible grandmother, there was something in her that was not entirely satisfied by that role. She had talents for which there was no outlet for a woman in 1954, 1956, well into the 1960s or even 70s. Dad had his career. You know, I could go down to the city and county building and watch Dad try a case. There were options. There were avenues for men with talent. In 1954, there were not options like that. There were not professional options. As I say, Mom was a great homemaker, but there was something in her that a little bit, kicked against the pressure to be the good, conventional suburban homemaker and housewife and mother of the 1950s. And I think, if she was scary and if she did have a biting wit and an acerbic sense of humor, I mean, it was partly because of the frustration. I think the wit was often a way of expressing some of the criticisms that she could not, and some of the dissatisfactions that she couldn't express otherwise. But she had her wit and she had her intelligence as survival tools, and although she was always scary and always acerbic, and I think that the acerbicness is part of what we loved. I know is part of what I loved about her. I think she eventually figured out, in a sense, how to accept some of the limitations of the maternal role as it was sort of imposed upon her when she was in her 20s and 30s. She found ways to sort of compensate by being incredibly interested, not just in her kids, as she was, but in a way she was interested in her kids because through us she could be interested in the world. She always wanted to know what I was reading, what movies I was seeing, Lee and I were seeing, what Broadway shows we went to see, who was in them. And she loved watching prestige television. And I think, for her, culture, popular culture and the arts, music, Mom and Dad loved coming to New York to see Broadway shows, to go to the opera, to see dance. Mom was fascinated by dance. That was I think that was a lifesaver because she had an outlet for her intelligence. And as the years went on, Dad became more and more, I guess squeamish is the word. He had trouble watching the things that Mom watched. He was very phobic about violence, and not just violence, but any kind of tension, anything that was slightly dark or heavy, he couldn't handle it. So Mom would have to watch The Sopranos on her own. Mom loved The Sopranos. There was a story, I can't repeat this, I can't quote this verbatim because we're in a synagogue. But Dad just couldn't get on board with The Sopranos. It was too violent. The language was too, as he would have said, schmutz. It was too dirty, it was too vulgar, it was too obscene. And one day he walked past the den where she was watching The Sopranos, and he stood there for a minute, and he heard some F words and some S words and a few others. And he said to Mom, "How can you watch this?" And again, I won't quote exactly, but she said, in her Tony Soprano voice, "What the F are you talking about?" And she continued, I mean, she loved, the edgier the show, the more she liked it. You know, the more a dark comedy it was, the more, the more quirky and offbeat it was, the more she loved it. She did not love Succession, I have to say. I thought that would be a big favorite of hers. And she said, and this is also very Mom, I was talking with her about it on the phone, I said, why don't you like Succession? And she said, it reminds me too much of my own family, except with less money. And that's pretty acerbic, right? So I thought, wow, Mom. Ooh, and this was, 2 years ago. I mean, she did have that humor, and it could be, as I say, I confess, I was licking my wounds for a few days after that. I had to spend a fair amount of time with my therapist over that Succession line. But, and all of us were a little bit, all of us were, how shall I put it, felt the lash of Mom's wit, or felt, the sting of Mom's wit. I mean, it came with love, but there was often a sting. And I remember once Mom and Dad needed 24/7 care, and Donna and Vila, came on board, and they took over, and they're here today, and I'm so glad. They are the A-team of the caregivers, Donna and Vila, and they have done an amazing job, and we're so grateful to both of you. I remember it was sort of early in the relationship, and Mom was having some trouble adjusting to having caregivers in the house all the time, and she was having trouble with, what it meant, that they could no longer take care of themselves. They needed help. And I remember, and I knew that she had been a little bit sharp, or I suspected that she had been a little bit sharp with some of the people trying to help her. And I remember going in to talk to, I think, Donna. It was just Donna. I don't think Vila was in the room, but Donna was on duty that day. And I went into the den, and I said, my mom and Dad both really appreciate you and love you. But my mom can be I know my mom can be a little bit, tart at times. And Donna said something, I think, very smart and very true, which is, it's because she's afraid. What wasn't there to be afraid of at that point? Dad had Parkinson's, Mom had COPD. They were becoming increasingly vulnerable. I understood that the wit was Mom's wit, and that which made her tough and scary and formidable, was there to manage her, not just her fear, but her softer feelings. And Mom had a lot of those, as we discovered more and more, and just especially in the last couple of years, the last few months. Mom was incredibly tender. She was incredibly sentimental. She was incredibly generous. And Donna, you're right. There was the wit and the humor were part of her charm, but they were also a way of managing her, her fears and her scarier emotions. She did say, and this it was typical Mom, that what she wanted as her epitaph, she wanted written on her gravestone the phrase, "Enough already." And although that was a typical Mom, enough already, I don't think she meant it, or at least I don't think she meant it completely, because another thing she said, and we were discussing this yesterday, and she was extremely emphatic about this in the last few days. She said to a number of us, to Ron, I think to Amy, to Traven, Ed, do not let them say at my funeral that I went peacefully. Mom did not go gentle into that good night. And she didn't go gentle because she didn't want to go. She loved life. She loved us. She loved her kids. She loved her grandkids. She loved all her partners. She loved all her friends. She loved all of you. She did not want to leave. So she certainly did not go peacefully. And I think, that's one of the millions of things that I love about her. One of the things that I've learned since Dad died is that the person is gone, but the love is not gone. And the relationship continues. I feel I've still been talking to Dad these last 2 months. I still have conversations with Dad, and I know that I'm going to be talking with Mom for the rest of my life. I called her from Boston every night around 4:30 here in Denver to talk, and I looked forward to those calls. They were one of the high points of my day. They weren't always easy, but I love talking to Mom because she was funny, because we talked about movies, we talked about TV. She wasn't able to get out anymore. But when Traven and Ed were here recently for Thanksgiving, they sat down and started watching the Americans with her, which she loved, or rewatching it. It was one of her favorite shows. She was, she was always there up until last Tuesday night. She was talking about family and old Denver and sharp as a tack, as they say. So I know that Mom has left us, but in another way, Mom will never leave me. I will be talking to Mom every night. I will be talking with her in my dreams. I will talk with you tonight, Mom. I love you. I will always love you. You were the most amazing mother ever. Thank you for everything.
Well, doing this twice in less than 2 months is a difficult thing. But I thank everyone for coming out today who's here. And, if Joe was worried about following Aunt Mimi's act, now I've got 2 acts to follow. So. Need to put my pages forward. This is sort of, I've got an internal dialogue that says, my mother saying to me right now, the rabbi said you probably wouldn't be able to get up and talk. You'd lose your place or not be able to do something. Look, now, here, you've ruined my funeral. I want to take a few moments, though, to talk about the very special relationship that Buzzy, as she is known, shared with so many of us who are here today. In doing so, I know I'm inevitably going to leave some people out, and I'm sorry for that in advance. I've got a sort of current state of grieving, and, compressing a 91-year life into a few minutes creates some limitations. I was, among the sons, the one who did what Buzzy did. I had 4 sons, and even the age span of my 4 sons is very similar to the age span of the 4 of us brothers. And so we had a lot in common. My boys grew up in close proximity to Mom. She was going to be called Bubby, but Greg, as a 2-year-old, renamed her Buzzy, and the name stuck. It's not only my sons who know Mom as Buzzy. A whole generation of their friends calls her Buzzy as well. And lest I forget to mention this, my son's closest friends make up a small village of grandchildren by proxy. The kids who always found themselves welcome at Mom's home and at Mom's ever-expanding dinner table. I'm firmly convinced, for instance, that Andrew Lay would probably be at least a couple inches shorter and 20 pounds less muscle mass if he hadn't eaten so much food at the Litvak family tables. Shortly before Trish and I started having children, I had embarked on a legal career that had very little time flexibility. While I took a day off each week to take care of the boys, those other 4 days were filled pretty full. Trish, at the same time, had just become a physician, and she was in the throes of residency and then a very demanding medical practice. So how do two busy professionals handle, at that time, 3 young children? They have a boozy. We asked her to take the kids for a day each week, and we hoped she'd do that for a couple years. But she basically kept doing it until the kids kept driving, and given the age span of the kids, that was about 25 years of caregiving. If any one of the kids was sick, or if they got injured at school, Trish and I weren't always available to care for them. So in addition to her day a week, Lizzie would spring into action to take care of them. And the care she gave the boys was over the top. My kids recently told me that they certainly love me and they certainly love their mother, but when they had sick days at Boosie's, her caregiving was on a whole different level. There were multiple blankets, each with a different texture that she would wrap them in. There was the matzo ball soup that was freshly made. There were the cool towels for fever and the hot tea for sore throats. And after the kids described this to me, I came to realize why they had so many sick days growing up. On the occasions when the boys weren't sick, their time with Lizzie was spent in so many ways. At the condo, they would go down to the swimming pool. They'd use the pool table, the sauna, the weight room. And the boys delighted in drawing pictures for their Boosie, because when they finished a picture, Boosie would treat that scrawling like it was a pièce de résistance. She would hold it up high, and she would march it off into the room in her house that she had dubbed the art gallery. And she would find the perfect spot on the wall for those pieces that are all still there today. Of course, what the boys maybe didn't realize is that, in fact, was that what they were told was the art gallery was actually a laundry room. Those who know Mom are aware that she was tiny, never more than 106 pounds. She was probably closer to 80 pounds in the last few years. I say this because Mom never seemed to understand the irony of looking at one of her kids or her grandkids and saying, "You look skinny. Let me get you something to eat." Perhaps the best way to convey the nature, though, of Mom's relationship with each of her grandsons as they got older is to convey the kind of dialogue I might have had just recently with Mom, sitting around the kitchen table. Mom might say, "Greg, he called last night. He's so sweet. All your boys are so sweet." I said, "So, Mom, what did Greg have to say?" "Well, he was driving from Birmingham to some other cruddy place in the South." "What's he doing down there? Doesn't he know that Jews don't go to the South?" "Unless it's a civil rights march, and then I'll be very proud of him, but he still needs to be careful." "Well, yeah, Mom, but he's coming back tomorrow." "Yeah, well, I know, but he told me then he's going hunting this weekend, and haven't you told him the Jews don't hunt?" And anyway, I never see his kids. "Mom, Amy and I were here on Tuesday with Tatum and Carson, and I have the pictures to prove it. You were down on the floor with them playing in the living room. I've got pictures. I'll show them to you." "Yeah, well, yeah. The next time I see him, he'll probably be in college." "So, how's Doug?" "He's good, Mom. You'll see him tonight. He's going to come do the caregiving tonight." "I know. He's so sweet, but why is he wasting his life watching me?" "Because he loves you, Mom. He volunteered to do the caregiving shift once a week overnight." "Well, I don't need any caregivers, but it is nice having him here." And then she'd say, "Ron, when Doug was here last week, he was all over me. If I got up out of bed, if I even moved a leg, he was there to help me get to the bathroom in the middle of the night." "Well, he's doing what I asked him to do, Mom. You never ring your button to get people up, so he's doing what we asked him to do." "Well, Ron," he's like, "what do you call that thing when parents are hanging around their children too much?" I said, "Helicopter parents?" He said, "Yes, he's my helicopter grandson." And I love him. I wouldn't want him any other way. He's so sweet to his bosom. And then she would repeat, of course, but Ron, I don't need any caregivers. I'm going to digress for a minute because, as Joe mentioned, Vila and Donna are here today, and they were covered, between the two of them, 96 hours a week of the caregiving that mom and dad needed. And they did it with just remarkable skill. But as Joe mentioned, it was not always easy for them to win a place in her heart. I think Donna won that place through patience. Vila, on the other hand, took a different approach, which was that, oh, you Jews do sarcasm, I see. I can do that. So mom would be shooing Vila out of the kitchen saying, I don't need you in here, get up. And Vila would say, oh, no, you don't need me. You have a broken arm, you have a walker, you have 2 oxygen concentrators that are bringing 2 cannulas in, and you're trying to move a pot of hot soup from one place to another. You're right, you don't need me. And mom would get that. Mom completely understood that and said, okay, you're right, move the pot for me. But don't do anything with it. And gradually, of course, the two of them formed this incredible bond through their mutual sarcasm and other wonderful techniques. While I'm on the subject of caregivers, and before I come back to the boys, I need to mention someone else who provided phenomenal care and more, all the way down the stretch. The older boy's mother, Trish, in the world of over-the-top, loving, and thoughtful care, Trish gave mom all the benefit of her years of working in geriatric medicine, and she gave her much more. She was a close friend of my mom, whom my mom cherished dearly and often talked about. And down the last couple years, Trish was there as frequently as almost any of us kids were. So back to the kitchen table discussion. The mom would then go into saying, we've covered Greg and Doug, so how's Brian? And I'd say, well, Brian's great. He's doing really well. I'm so glad he's back from Paris. I hated it when he was living there. Why was he living there? I said, well, Mom, he went to college there. He went to graduate school there. He got his first job there. But he's back now, and he's got a great job here. And she'd say, well, so when is he going to get married to Camilla? I love that girl. She's so good for him. And I'm dying soon, so he should be doing something like that. She was not above using that. And I'd say to her, Mom, I agree. And this is where I made her laugh. And she actually came up with a plan. I said, Mom, let's not put pressure on them. I'll do that at the funeral. After she stopped laughing, she looked me straight in the eye and she said, I'm holding you to that. I was debating whether I was going to go there with you guys, because, here's the nice prim and proper Joni on this shoulder and the little wickedly funny one, and she just won out over here, so. But, back to our discussion, I haven't talked about her relationship with Ben, my baby. Still in college, and he's in Switzerland. And she said, what's going on with Ben? You know how sweet that boy is, too. He loves to spend time with me when he's here. Why does he have to be in Europe? What's wrong with this country? I said, Mom, 30 minutes ago when I walked in the door, you were screaming at the television that this country's gone to HE double hockey sticks. And you were screaming at the news. She said, well, yeah, he needs to, I couldn't help it. There was that fascist pig who's running for president who's was on TV. And she said, Mom, Ben's in college there and he's loving and he's doing very well. I said, well, okay, but still, he should call his boozy and tell him to eat. He's too skinny. So now that I have grandchildren, I recognize how incredibly fulfilling, but also how exhausting it can be to take care of grandchildren for an entire day or even longer. And, Carson and Tatum, my grandchildren, they have 6 grandparents to do this, to share the load. And the 6 of us all get together and talk about the same thing, that, wow, it's so great. We really love doing it. But boy, is it tiring. But Buzzy seemed to draw more energy from taking care of the boys when she was doing it. When I'd come to get the boys, sometimes there'd be flavors of smells wafting from down the hallway from her apartment. And as I walked in, she'd say, well, I already cooked the food, so you better sit and eat, all of you. Otherwise it's going to all go to waste, so stay for dinner. And she would just keep going. She was like the Energizer Bunny. To use, I guess, a baseball analogy that I hope most of you will get, it's kind of like the 6 of us as grandparents are now in the minor leagues and hoping to get there. But Buzzy, we might be the various characters, I suppose, from Bull Durham or something, but Buzzy was the Shohei Ohtani of grandparents. I close with a quote from Midsummer Night's Dream. Shakespeare apparently anticipated Joni Litvak when he wrote, though she be but little, she is fierce. We all love you, Mom. I want to say one more thing before I sit down. No one's talked about the relationship, Dan, that you had with Mom. Dan, for the years now, I don't know how long it's been going on. I didn't know it was going on for a long time. Would call Mom every morning at 7:27 a.m. because he knew she was already up. And they had their talk every morning. And they were very close. They had the very special form of relationship. And Dan, I know that Mom's passing is especially painful for you. And we're here for you. I mean, that's one of the things Mom wanted all of us to do. She expressed it to most of us, that now that, she, who was the glue of the family, wasn't here to do everything that she had to do, that she fully expected us to be the glue and to hold together this family. And I pledge to you that we will do that. And Ed, no one's talked about you. Oh my God, the baby of the family. The apple of Mom's eye, grew up in this greatly different sort of time in the economic history of the family when they could afford to eat out at the fanciest of restaurants. And Ed was the one who went to private school, went to public school, but in some ways had to suffer through being an only child because he had the 3 of us who were all much older and out of the house at an early age. And she had so much love for you. And I know you were, through the years, always there for her. As recently as the last couple months, you were spending most of your time not in New York, but here, caring for her and spending the time with her. And she loved that, and she loved you so dearly. I just wanted to make sure you two get mentioned. Thank you.
I'm going to begin to speak about Joni by reading a poem that I found when I was looking through a particular section in my eulogy book about how to talk about someone who was so perceptive. And I think she would like it, except that it rhymes. So just bear with me for a second. When I am dead, I do not want a curious crowd to come with lamentations loud when I am dead. Nor do I want my words and ways rehearsed by time and tardy praise when life has fled. I only want the faithful few who stood through good and evil too, true friendship's test. I'd have them come, those very few, and drop perhaps a tear or two, and then without a sob or moan, go softly out and leave alone my soul to rest. It's pretty hard to eulogize someone whose last wish, according to her family, was no cliches. It's hard. It's hard to do. But in many ways, that strong desire not to be reduced to simple ideas, not to be reduced to phrases that don't hold unique meaning, is the essence of how we actually remember. And certainly is how we should remember Joni. She really relished and cherished the depth and complexity of life, and took great pains to make sure that she passed that on to her children, who could then pass it on to their children. She relished the relationships and the responsibilities of every day. And Joe, I think when you were talking about the frustrations that she might have felt, I think, yes, she took that and poured that into her wit and her criticisms or her short analytics of what was going on. But I think she also took that and poured it into the responsibilities of every moment, made sure that her passion and her intelligence and her creativity could actually show up in everything that she did. And in that way, she really created holiness in the everyday, in the tucking in the taking care, in the pushing someone just a little bit harder to be just a little bit smarter, because she knew that it was possible for each and every one of you. And so when we talk about her life as being holy, we're not talking about the abstract or detached or ethereal sense of holiness that sometimes we talk about in spaces like this. We're really talking about earthly, lived holiness that shows up in generation after generation after generation when it is done well. When the regular realities of life are infused with awareness and purpose. And that is what she did. There are some people we know that we come in contact with who seem to cut through the veil of life, who find what is actually important and do it and love it and make sure other people can love it. And that is where Joni lived. And when we were talking about this desire to not go, there are some people in our community who imagine that peaceful passing is exactly what they want. And there are plenty of psalms and texts and stories that speak to that desire. But we also know that there are some people who love that lived holiness so much that they don't want to go, that they love what they found here. And there are real stories in our tradition about that as well. Most famously, all of the stories about how Moses, our great teacher and leader, left this earth all reflect a desire to not go. Now, there's a lot of tradition that teaches us that in many ways, Moses was the great mother of our people. God said, we're going to go somewhere, and then Moses said, so I have to schlep them. That's basically what happened. And through 40 years in the desert, Moses was the one that everyone complained to. Moses had to figure out what to do when the people didn't like what they were eating. And Moses had to figure out what to do when the people didn't like what they were drinking. And so there is this parallel between Moses and the great mother. And at the end of Moses' life, when he is standing on top of the mountain, looking out into the land into which he cannot go, God says to Moses, it's time. And Moses says, I don't want to. Can you please, God, turn me into a milk cow? And I will walk alongside the people. I don't have to be me, but I want to be near them. And God says, Moses, it's time to go. And then Moses says, can I please be a bird? Can I fly above them and see all of their accomplishments? And God says, Moses, it's time to go. And then Moses says, can I be a tree and stand next to them so I can provide shelter and shade for them? And God says, Moses, it's time to go. And then finally, God speaks inside Moses' soul and says, it's time. Your work is done. And Moses' soul speaks directly to God and says, why would I want to leave when the beauty I have seen is so radical here? When the work that I have done is so critical here? When the seeds that I have planted are only starting to grow? And God says, Moses, because you have planted the seeds, you will never be gone. You will be here in each and every person of the people of Israel who carry on your memory throughout the rest of their lives. And that is what I think about when I think about Joni. It's okay to say, I'm proud of what I did. I loved it here. I want to see the next chapter. And it's okay for all of you to now recognize that you do that for her. You carry that forward for her. And so every time you live more fiercely and love more deeply, and perhaps even find the softness inside yourself and bring it out just a little bit more, because I'm sure there were moments when she really wanted to do that you help her live forward. And Joe, I'm so glad that you quoted Dylan Thomas, because I brought it with me. And I want to conclude with this very famous poem. And I think when we read it, you'll see why it speaks so appropriately to who she was. Do not go gentle into that good night. Old age should burn and rave at close of day and rage against the dying of the light. Though wise women at their end know dark is right, because their words had forked no lightning, they do not go gentle into that good night. Good women, the last wave by, crying how bright their frail deeds might have danced in a green bay. Rage against the dying of the light. And wild women who caught and sang the sun in flight and learned too late they grieved it on its way. Do not go gentle into that good night. Grave women near death who see with blinding sight, blind eyes could blaze like meteors and be gay. Rage against the dying of the light. And you, my mother, there on the sad height, Curse and bless me now with your fierce tears, I pray. Do not go gentle into that good night. Rage and rage against the dying of the light. How blessed are we that Joni raged in the way that she did and brought her fullness of life and passion and complexity and intelligence and fierceness and love into this world with that much strength. We hope that her soul rests in exactly the way she wants it to. We hope that her pleasure in the next beyond is to feel the gifts that she brought into this world with fullness and with love. And together we all say, Amen. With that in our minds and in our hearts, we are going to rise as we are able for the memorial prayer. El Malei Rachamim Shochen Bamromim Hamsei Menucha Nechona Tachat Kanfei Hashchina Im Kedoshim Udorim Kezohar Arakia Mazhirim Het Nishmat Surah Bat Yosef V'Chana Shehalecha Le'olama Barachamim Yostirea Beseter Kenafav Le'olamim V'yitzror mitzror hachayim Et nishmata Adonai unachalata V'tanuach b'shalom Hamishkava V'nomar Amen. May the source of life, the fountain of all being, open our hearts to compassion and our eyes to wisdom, that we might glimpse in perfect peace and sadness the way of all things. May Joni's memory be for us a blessing, and may we never let the light of her love grow dim in our hearts. May we remember all her worthy and righteous deeds, that her memory be forever bound up in the bond of life. God is our source and our destination, our beginning and our end. And may Joni's death awaken us to this truth, that the bond of love we shared and share will never be severed in sorrow. May she rest in peace. And together we say, Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, that does conclude our service here at Temple Emmanuel. We will have interment at Emmanuel Cemetery. If you'd like to join us, we'd ask you to make your own way to the cemetery. We do not have an escorted procession today. If you'd like to follow the hearse and some of the family cards that you might recognize, you're welcome to do so, but just remember, we are not in procession, so you must obey all traffic laws just like we will. We'll also ask you to remain in your places, and we'll ask you to to refrain from talking with the family if you happen to see them in the restroom, in the foyer. They do need to get to their cars so we can conclude this process. Lastly, the family would like to invite you to their home for a shiv and condolence calls at the home of Joni's at 420 South Marion Parkway, number 1701. That was in the handouts that you might have picked up out front. They'll be there today from 5:30 p.m. until just about 8 p.m. If I can invite the pallbearers to come forward at this time.